The Eckardt Cemetery, established about 1854, was carved out of land owned by Abram Eckardt. But later, an evangelical association built a church on this site, which shows on the maps of 1878. Now this is a strange combination of peoples because the Eckardt family were originally Lutheran from the Bursey settlers. The Evangelical Association, supported by Abram Eckardt, was a modern offshoot from the U.S. of the Mennonite faith. And so they had a congregation here. There were only a couple of congregations in this part of Ontario, but it did not last very long. And we can still see in very dry periods the outline of the church that was here at least until 1878. Now this is probably the most diverse cemetery that we have in the city of Markham. At the very back corner, you see the heritage tombstones that probably date from the 1850s to the 1870s. And then more modern up here are recent plots because this is still an active cemetery. And over in this area, we have a group referred to as the Mandaean community, a Christian group from the center part of Iraq who have immigrated to the GTA and consider this their community burying grounds. And they have roughly 200 plots, which they have built a little fence around to differentiate it. So it's very active. We have this new area as well as the old area at the background. And again, this cemetery is most interesting in where it is situated, because on the north side we have the hydro lines, the major hydro lines that go through. On the western side we have a golf course, very quiet and peaceful. And around on the south side we have the CN bypass rail line. The cemetery is situated on the old McCowan Road, and so you have to leave the current McCowan and come up towards the golf course and then come up along the old road to gain access to it. Now these stones in this cairn are virtually undecipherable. They're very old, and these other stones that are currently in this old heritage area are very difficult to read, but they represent the old families back in the mid-1800s. And here in the back corner, right against the golf course, is the gravestone for Abram Eckardt, born 1800 and died in 1872, and his wife, who was a Hendricks, again, another one of the Bursey settler families. This is a very unusual monument. It's really concrete, but the name is John Canning. And this monument was moved here from another cemetery about 500 meters to the southwest. And with it were the remains of about 25 members of this family. It was a Canning family burial ground. Now it's no longer possible to move cemeteries like this. So this is kind of unique for us here in this cemetery. Buried here are two veterans, Peter Bowden and his wife Dorothy Bowden, née Mays. Both of those served in the Second World War, and these monuments in ground, flat markers, were provided by Veterans Affairs for their burial site. Back in the 1970s, the cemetery board recognized that more people were tending to consider cremation. And so the board created a series of plots along here for cremation burials. And the plots are only 2 feet by 2 feet, room enough for 2 urns for ashes, and then people put a flat marker on top of them. So this is kind of the city's first attempt at providing for cremation burials for our residents. And there are still plots available in ground on this cremation site. Of all our cemeteries, I think this Eckardt Cemetery responds to the diversity of our city as it exists today. We have old families being buried here. We have new families. You'll notice that there are Chinese inscriptions, there are Muslim inscriptions, there are Arabic. And this particular part of the cemetery is interesting because this Mandaean group requested of us, because of their traditions, that rather to be buried east-west, they prefer their grave sites to run north-south. So we in fact did resurvey this part of the cemetery so that they could meet their traditions, I guess, here at the cemetery. And one of the other traditions that they have when they have a burial, quite frequently they will bring food and have a light meal after the interment of the deceased. And you'll notice as you look around, they quite frequently like to put on a photograph of the person being interred in the particular plot. Now the two over here on the left, there's a double and 2 singles. That is one family. And the older person who negotiated for the plots, it was very important for him, and he actually put up a tombstone for a son that he had left back in Iraq, because he felt that needed to be recognized here as part of the family. They like to consider family plots, so they're buried together over time in this new country.